Hey, we're here again with our mayoral candidate, John Washington, who is also one of the area's historians. And the reason he's a historian is he is writing a book called The Last House in Scottsdale. And this one, he knew the owner and had an opportunity to do some work for. So let's have John give us a little tour of The Last House in Scottsdale.
The home that we're standing in front of was the home of Lester and Labula Mowry. Labula was my wife's grandmother's best friend in high school growing up, and they played around this area as they were kids, and then Lester and Labula lived here after they got married. This was the last original house in Scottsdale that was still occupied by the original resident. Labula passed away a few years ago, and she at one time had offered her house to the city as perhaps a historic structure, and the city really didn't express any interest in it at that time. And it's a real shame that they didn't take advantage of that because it's a fabulous little house, a really good example of the architecture from the early days of Scottsdale. And Labula really had it as a showplace. She maintained one of the most beautiful rose gardens in Scottsdale. She had a lawn that looked like a putting green, and people would wander by her house. We're here on Main Street, about a half block west of Scottsdale Road, and people would wander down from the art galleries on Main Street down to the Valley Ho, which is a half block to the west here, and they would wander by and look at her house, and they would come back by and look at her house, and they would go up and ring the doorbell for no particular reason other than to tell her that they admired her house and they wanted to know more about it. It was really kind of a magical thing. We used to visit Labula on a fairly regular basis. We'd come by, twice or three times a month when we were in the area for dinner or driving by, and talk to her, and she'd invite us in to sit in the living room and see all the pictures of all the celebrities that had stopped in to visit her just because she lived here on Main Street and just because they loved her house. She maintained correspondence with people all over the world who had been here to Scottsdale to visit, and to many of those people, Labula's house represented the best of Scottsdale. It's a little piece of suburbia, walking distance to the amenities that you'd otherwise find in a big city, and it's a shame that it couldn't have been preserved as a residence. The folks that own the structure now are going to open a restaurant here. It's going to be called House Restaurant, and they're about 30 days away from opening. I'm glad that they've preserved the majority of the structure. Even the outbuilding in the back is still here. The house is basically the same color it was the last time I saw it, and it's a really neat little piece of suburban heaven in downtown Scottsdale.
So John, as I'm panning on the house, can you point out, now right here we're looking at the front area, which is now bricked in, but was this the area that you said was a premier rose garden?
That's correct, yeah. The area that's up against the west rail here was her rose garden, and many of the rose bushes that were here were transplanted down to the Valley Ho. Labula personally knew the business owners here on Main Street, and she had a good conversation, running conversation with the folks at the Valley Ho. And so some of the rose bushes went down there. This would have been, this bricked-in area here would have been her front lawn, which literally looked like tiff. It was just like a putting green. It was almost didn't look real. It was so pretty. She had several parking spaces here in the front, and she always had issues with people at the restaurant next door parking, patrons of the restaurant parking, thinking this was parking for the restaurant. And it does kind of look like commercial parking spaces, so she'd had a chain there for many years, and I actually welded up a gate for her and installed a gate for her that's since been removed in front of the parking spaces. But she was always kind and courteous whenever anyone would park in front of her house, and always tried to have a conversation with them and make sure they understood they were parking at her house and not at the restaurant.
Well, John, as a citizen candidate for mayor, aren't neighborhoods one of your top priorities?
Absolutely. I mean, my involvement in city government for the last decade really stemmed from issues that we experienced in our neighborhood, which is at the northeast corner of Miller and Osborne, right on the edge of the designated downtown area. Urban encroachment from the downtown area and issues involving noise and parking and all of those sorts of things that really erode the quality of life in Scottsdale are affecting my neighborhood, and they have for many years. There are folks that want to take advantage of the quality of life that we have and leverage that for their own profit. That is sort of the role of developers in our society. It's their job, it's how they make their living, and I don't fault them at all for asking for zoning concessions that come along with issues like that. But I think the City Council and the Mayor have a responsibility to make sure that we minimize those impacts on the folks that already live here, that built this community like Lester and Labula did, and like I hope my family and I have contributed to the knowledge of the value of our community and its quality of life.
Well, thank you, John. And hey, today we are here on Main Street looking at one of Scottsdale's magnificent architectural homes with our mayoral candidate, John Washington, and tomorrow we'll be somewhere else, so stay tuned. AZ Lipstick Lady signing off.